Okay, it's 6 p.m. We're at the top of the hour. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to SAVE's speaker series. We're launching a poll right now, and we'd like for you to complete that quickly, as all responses to the poll are anonymous. My name is Orlando Gonzalez. I'm the Executive Director of Safeguarding American Values for Everyone, SAVE. My pronouns are he and him. SAVE's mission is to promote, protect, and defend equality for people in South Florida who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. Today is our first in a three-part speaker series highlighting candidates running for Miami-Dade County Mayor. All the candidates running for mayor were invited, and only 3 of them accepted the invitation, so that alone already speaks volumes about the people that have been invited and accepted our invitation. Miami-Dade County includes a population of nearly 3 million residents, of which half of those people are registered to vote. So we're really excited to put this together. These sessions are intended to help members of the community learn more about each of the individuals running for mayor. Our hope is to support how you can be able to make an informed decision when choosing which candidate you vote for in August and in November. In addition to these forums, the SAVE Action Pack will invite all of the candidates to participate in our endorsement process. The candidates who wish to receive an endorsement will respond to the questionnaire that we send them. And on that questionnaire, they're going to be able to share with us their policy position on various issues that affect the LGBT community. Following the completion of the questionnaire, each candidate is then interviewed by a panel that's comprised of members of the community, and they will vote to either endorse the candidate or not. The work of SAVE is primarily supported by individual donors, followed by corporate sponsors and philanthropic grants. You can become a donor at save.lgbt/membership. Membership is available for as little as just $35 per year. If you've not responded to the poll, please do so now. Today's forum will include a 15-minute presentation by our Commissioner Xavier Suarez. Following the presentation, we will then take questions from the public. All the attendees in this webinar are muted except for the presenters. We'll be able to take live questions from you by you submitting the questions in the toolbar of the Zoom in the button called Q&A. You can start typing in your questions during the presentation and then also at the end. Just keep feeding us the questions and we'll be able to line them up so that when we get to that part of the presentation. If you've joined us on Facebook Live, you can only listen in on the conversation. To submit questions, please go ahead and join the discussion through Zoom. Let's close the poll and look at the results. Okay, so we asked people if they were registered to vote. Majority of people online today are. We've asked people if they have already registered to vote by mail. It looks like 71% of the population in this survey has said yes, and a couple of people said no. So we know that we've got some work in terms of being able to get more people registered to vote. Given the current public health crisis, we know that distancing might be an issue and a concern when people go to the polls, so we'll make greater efforts to get people to register to vote by mail. The next question is if you've already decided who you're going to be voting for the Miami-Dade County mayoral race. Some people said yes, majority of people said no, and some people are undecided. So these forums, obviously, I think are going to be useful and helpful in terms of understanding the policy positions that the various candidates are taking. The last question is whether or not you have already responded to the census, the 2020 census. 71% of the attendees say yes, 30% say no. So we have also some work to do in that area. That is federal funding for our community, and we need to be able to increase that number. Last we heard from Commissioner Higgins last week, she had indicated that we are lagging behind. So let's get started. Welcome, Commissioner Suarez. Thank you for being with us tonight. I hope that you and your family are all well. I'm going to turn this over to you so that you can be able to present for 15 minutes. I will disappear. When I come back on, that's your signal that you have 3 minutes before your presentation is done, and then we'll take questions. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Orlando, and thanks to all of you for joining. I we'll be looking a little bit to the right here where I have my little sort of cheat sheets. You know, they're actually Post-its. I didn't know that I was going to go on for 15 minutes, or maybe I had forgotten it. In any case, when you see me looking to the side, I'm not getting someone to give me a line or anything. It's just that I have about 10 Post-its over here that I'm looking at. To begin with, I think my record is clear as to LGBT matters. The three principal issues that we voted on. The last one was the creation of a committee, and I'm always more than interested in taking recommendations from SAVE. On same-sex marriage, I voted with your recommendation and in favor of permitting it, certainly. And then on transgender, I want to say that on the transgender issues where I also voted as you recommended, I learned a lot in the process. I didn't just vote. I met with folks on both sides, and I was particularly impressed by some folks that were actually transgender themselves, and how much I identified with them in whatever gender they identified with. So that was a learning experience for me, and I thank you and everyone that was involved in that process. I come from a family of 14 brothers and sisters, to which I can add Damien Pardo, because we're both we share a godfather, so we're brothers of the same godfather, and so I have experience with every kind of human characteristic, trait, sexual preference, just from my own family. And the thing that motivates me, the single, as a politician, and the reason that I'm involved in politics is something that I actually would echo Commissioner Monestein when he would talk about a society being judged by how it treats its most vulnerable. And the first time he said that on the commission was about 7 or 8 years ago. I said, that's a quote from Hubert Humphrey. It's the way I think. It's I wake up in the mornings, frankly, and the thing that concerns me the most, and I tell this to my staff, we wake up in the morning, we have a job, we have a roof over our heads, we have health care. So we have to try to make sure that everybody in Dade County has those things. And that's what we try to do. We have limited input on some of it, but on a lot of it, we have a lot of input, and we should be doing a heck of a lot better. And I know the numbers every time. I mean, when they ask me, well, how many people are unemployed in Dade County? I would tell them, you know, typically it would be about 45,000, 50,000, 5% of the working force, et cetera. Now, of course, it's probably 150,000. And the extra 100, as you probably all know, are people that work in an industry, a leisure industry, which is the least paid, least benefits, least savings, least capital, and they're the most vulnerable, frankly. And that's why during this particular crisis, the COVID crisis, I have been working very closely with two elements of the working class. One is, of course, Unite Here and Wendy Walsh, who represents, to the extent that there are unions, there's only about 10,000 of people that work in the leisure industry, hotels, restaurants, et cetera, actually have unions, you know, only the ones that work for the big hotels and the big restaurant chains. So about 90,000 are only represented in the sense that we advocate for them. They don't have unions per se. A big part of the battle too has been representing the people who do have unions, and for whatever reason, the county doesn't seem to work very closely with them or particularly care about their interests and concerns and safety. And in particular, with the AFL-CIO and the Transport Workers Union. You may have seen some of my tweets. I was the first person that alerted the community and the county that the TWU employees that you know drive the buses and Metro Rail and take care of it and maintain it and guide it didn't have masks. And so I walked into my office. There were 1,000 masks there that somebody had allocated to me, not even told me about it. And I gave 500 right away to the TWU. And with that, they were able to make it to the next level. Another thing that I have done during the crisis has been worrying about the homeless. In particular, I'm very pleased and proud. We haven't said it publicly because I'm waiting for them to do it. I try not to beat my own drum too much, but I guess this opportunity allows me to do it a little bit more. And that is that I put together a fund of $100,000 that will be multiplied tenfold by the efforts of people like Dr. Armin Henderson and specifically the organization known as Hermanos de la Calle. Those folks nurture and get very close to and really get almost like adopt the homeless in the downtown area. And I just put together a package of $100,000. I took 25 and later 50,000 from my own budget. I managed to get the Downtown Development Authority to put 25 and the mayor of Miami to put another 25. And ultimately, we'll be able to place into permanent housing. The model that Hermanos de la Calle used is very unusual because it goes straight to permanent residency for any of the homeless that are free of an addiction or have gone through a rehab program. So that's been very important in the last 2 months, obviously, for every reason imaginable, including the fact that all the homeless got kicked out of all the parks. So they really had nowhere to go except places like downtown, et cetera. So the average person in Dade County, in Miami-Dade, the thing that concerns us the most is transportation. There's no doubt. When I announced my candidacy, I said, 3 issues: transportation, transportation, and transportation. Housing is very important, and I'm going to address that in a second. But we have, and in the case of the coronavirus, we may have been saved a little bit by having such an inefficient system of public transportation. But that cannot go on. And so other candidates may talk about it. They may say the SMART plan cannot be funded with the half cent, or it should have been done a full cent, or we misused the money and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, there is something we can do about it, and I have done something about it. 3 times I made presentations to the CITT board, Citizens Independent Transportation Trust, and got resolutions from them that would say, stop using the money for operations and maintenance. It's supposed to be to build up the system and have not the 2 links that we have now, but 5 corridors with rail, preferably. And so the $3.6 billion for the SMART plan can easily be put together if my proposals are heeded and if the county stops misusing the money. It's about $100 million a year. The multiplier that the CITT has for financing is 18 to 1, and that's half of the SMART plan right there. The rest of the money comes from a variety of other initiatives that I have proposed, including taking $100 million from the MDX, which is also bondable and is also available. It probably won't be quite as high because of the fact that there's been less cars on the road, but we'll probably be able to ultimately generate the full $3.6 billion from local sources. I haven't even mentioned the renewal fees on your automobile tag. We're sending $157 million. I think it's up to $170 million a year. And I've asked in the proposed legislation to have 50 million of that also be thrown into the stream of revenues that we need to finance the SMART plan. I've also filed a suit for which the adorable or not so adorable mayor of Dade County made an ethics complaint against me, and it was ultimately dismissed. And that lawsuit is still going on, so be attentive to that. I don't want to talk too much about it because they tell me I can't sue my own county. You would think that if the county is acting unconstitutionally, commissioner would be able to sue them, but that's another issue for another day. We will get the SMART plan built. We will connect the county, all 5 corners of the county. And the most creative thing that I did on that is most recently, since my efforts were frustrated by the administration, was to say, well, guess what? We have the FEC line, which goes all the way from downtown to Aventura. When you take into account the fact that the city of Miami, with its eminent mayor, when he was a commissioner, okay, he put together a deal where they got a perpetual easement for tri-rail trains to come all the way down and then across the county from Hialeah to across 74th Street, Point Siena Park, Liberty City, Little Haiti, Lemon City, Wynwood, Midtown, Wynwood into downtown Miami. And that agreement is in place. It's a perpetual easement. And that's why I had sunshine meetings with Commissioner Mana's team and Mayor Suarez to activate that line. And that was right before, of course, the county decided and our mayor decided that instead of activating that line and getting all of that completed, charging a very small sum, ideally public transit should be free. And that's another element of my platform. People are going to say you can't do that now because, you know, we can't afford it. Well, the revenues are down 80%. So we might as well make it all the way down and make the system free. And Kansas City has done that recently. Its eminent mayor, who was just elected, one of the first things he did, he had been homeless himself, by the way, some years before. He's a law school professor, and he made public transit free. Kansas City, of course, is a lot smaller than Miami-Dade County, so it's a $100 million hit, and that is 2% of our budget. On housing, another 1% of our general revenue should be going into the housing trust fund in the county. We get roughly $50 million a year from a variety of federal programs, and that's only allowing us to build and subsidize maybe 1,000 units a year. We need to at least duplicate that and follow the example to a great extent of the city of Miami, which has 12,000 units that they're trying to build in the next 5 years. And we should be emulating the city and doing even better because we have a lot more resources. On the issue of on the environment, and by the way, on affordable housing, one of the problems that we have is for the working classes and the working poor is that they can't afford the utilities. So I have legislation very similar to Commissioner Levine Cava, but a little bit more hard-hitting, that says she wants to study the possibility of requiring solar energy on all of the housing that we build. The city of South Miami requires it on any new housing built by government or by the private sector. I want to, and I push forth legislation, which is stalled in committee, like a lot of things have been these last few years, that would require, okay, so that there's no reason why government cannot put out affordable housing that people could then not expect to have to pay substantial amounts of money, either for insurance, taxes, or utilities. And so that takes your PITI to a much lower level. My model would allow housing to be built, particularly if it's on county land, so you don't have any cost of land acquisition. I think that tells me there's 3 minutes left. Correct? Okay, thank you for the thumbs up. I hope that applies, the thumbs up applies to my entire presentation up to now. So you say, well, how can you do all of these things? Well, folks, the county has the most bloated bureaucracy, and you might not hear this from some of my colleagues, you know. I'm a fiscal conservative. I don't think we need to tax people more than we already are, okay? The county is receiving close to $9 billion a year between operating and capital expenditures and revenue. We can do incredible things with that. Of course, when the county bureaucracy comes and says we need to have 7,000 automobiles, of which 3,500 are take-home cars, other than a police unit, a police cruiser, there's no reason, it may be a detective, okay, that needs to have a car that is not that is not identifiable. There's no reason to have people drive home cars. And there's no reason to have a fleet of 7,000. The police officers would be maybe 1,000 in the county who are on patrol. $88 million for furniture. There's absolutely no reason for that. The consulting agreements, the water and sewer department, the two consulting agreements cost us close to $200 million. I happen to be a mechanical engineer. You know, pumps, pipes, and plants, the 3 Ps, have not really, you know, in any way been innovated in the last 30 or 40 years. There's absolutely no reason to pay consultants. And of course, we have this awful system of negotiated bidding. The procurement in the county has been in bad shape. You'll hear Commissioner Pinellas, former Mayor Pinellas, talk about that from his days. Well, folks, it's time that we do something about it and we make all bids competitive and we avoid any consulting agreements that are not needed. The Water and Sewer Department has plenty of engineers. They recently got rid of some that were educated in Cuba and didn't have their credentials here in the United States, but they were very good engineers. Instead went to consultants, and of course you saw the unseemly battle between lobbyists that ultimately led to the consulting deal being separated into two, a construction manager and a program manager. I mean, I've been involved in very big engineering projects throughout my life, and I've never seen the need for a program manager to amplify and remediate what we have in our county water and sewer system. All the candidates express good ideas for the most part. We're all well-intentioned. Very few are able to carry out things. To give you an example, the Summer Youth Jobs Program. When I got started on it, I brought it to the mayor, and I couldn't get any funding out of him. By the time I repeated it 3, 4, 5 years in a row, got the Children's Trust involved, the school board involved, we went from 0 summer jobs for youth to 2,700. And of course, this year we're going to take a little hit on that. So I have the quantitative models. I understand budget. I understand finance, and I get things done. And that maybe separates me a little bit from some of my opponents.
Thank you, Commissioner. Really appreciate you taking the time to articulate some of the priorities that you have outlined there. I know that the one that you led with really stood out as transportation. I'm going to go through some of the questions here and be able to punt those over to you, get your feedback, and then be able to continue to take questions from members of the audience. For those of you that have joined us, on the Zoom toolbar is the Q&A button. Click on that button, go ahead and submit questions, and we will continue to have a conversation here with Commissioner Suarez. The first one is, I'm just going to read it. It says, many of the religious freedom laws frame religious freedom in the context of openly discriminating against the LGBT community, or even being able to deny services. Can you share your thoughts on this topic? How should religious businesses like hospitals, schools, and nursing homes protect and serve LGBTQ employees and clients?
Wow, that is well framed. It requires a heck of a lot of knowledge of constitutional law and of our local laws and customs and regulations. I frankly am not aware of any overt, certainly de jure type discrimination in any way. De facto, if that means, for example, actually what we've had in the last couple of months is that religious, priests, reverends, rabbis are not allowed into hospitals right now to give the last rites or whatever to their congregants. And so that's a little bit of a problem of religious freedom there, and perhaps in the opposite direction. But I would love to know more about that and be more educated. Maybe I missed something. Certainly at Jackson Memorial and in the public health system of the county, we would treat LGBT patients and allow their expression totally and absolutely as much as anyone else. They might actually not allow people, I can't imagine that they wouldn't allow people to express other views, but certainly That would be a very interesting question. I don't want to say it's above my pay grade because I'll never say that, but maybe I need a more detail on that.
That's helpful. So there's a very broad question that came in. And this one is really wanting to understand, why are you running for mayor?
It frustrates the heck out of me to see these resources that the county has not applied correctly. It is just inconceivable that, for example, when I was talking about that particular measure of requiring solar energy in projects that we subsidize, that we build, my particular legislative initiative is sitting there in committee. And actually, sometimes it doesn't make it to committee. The county attorney's office says, well, another commissioner has a similar bit of legislation. Fine, let's hear both. And that's what I did, by the way, in that case. That one at least got to committee. It didn't make it out of committee, but I said, well, let's invite Commissioner Levine Cava to our committee, because I'm in the committee, in the housing committee, and she's not. And so she came and we talked about it, and we aired our views. But it is frustrating to see that we have so many resources and that a lot of it is going to all the wrong places. I mean, we have a bureaucracy where one time I proposed that salaries should be capped at 162.5. The reason I said 162,500 is that's what Supreme Court justices make in the state of Florida. And they said, oh, but we can't, we'll lose a lot of capable and competent, qualified administrators. And I said, you know, I really can't think of any that I would want to pay more than 162,000. And then I said, well, Jennifer Glazer Moon maybe, but you know what? I now understand the budget as well as Jennifer, and I realize, and finance as well as Ed Marcus, and I realize that part of the problem is we have made it very difficult for the average person to understand the county budget. I became an expert in the city of Miami's budget, but it is nothing compared to the complexity of the county. And I can illustrate with some of the budget of one of the departments, which didn't used to exist 40 years ago, the IT department, $211 million now for IT. I mean, it just frustrates me. Plus, I have unfinished business. I think that, you know, the way I was leading the city of Miami, the way I could lead the county, when I took over the city of Miami in 1985, we had a $200 million underfunding of our pension funds. By the time I left office, it was totally balanced. We had a sports franchise that wanted to leave. We ended up with 3 sports franchises. The ability to get along with both the private sector bigwigs, okay, and to keep confidential things like the Performing Arts Center, that was actually a gift from Knight Ridder that was handed to me confidentially. And so you don't see me going out and get all kinds of credit, but we get things done. We brought Bayside. We brought 2 police substations that had been funded 10 years before. We have $25 million for affordable housing, again, approved 10 years before. Now 1 penny spent, okay? And so it isn't just having good motives and, you know, but it's getting things done. And I think sometimes that I'm the only one that can get things done. I compliment, for example, former Mayor Pinellas for his work on the homeless, but you know, the Homeless Coalition was initiated by myself with Mayor Clark, and we brought Alva Chapman in. Actually, he brought us in, to be fair. He said the governor had called him to get involved in it, and we set up the first coalition. And you know, I stayed with it, and look where we are now. We have a homeless trust, and a lot of that is due to the efforts, the good efforts of Commissioner Pinellas. But I also look at every penny that's spent and misspent, and I don't take the bureaucrats' quantitative models. I have a master's in public policy. Everybody forgets that. You know, the quantitative models that I not only have learned, but have taught at St. Thomas, and the law that I have taught at St. Thomas enable me a lot of times to deal with things that other commissioners and other candidates for mayor may not be able to. So, you know, I mean, I see these talents that I have, God gave me in many ways, and I want to apply them to make this a great county, and particularly one, my son says this all the time, I want everyone in this county to have the same opportunity that I have had. You know, I came here as a refugee, and I was allowed to go to the best universities and get scholarships and financial aid and ultimately become mayor of a city in 25 years. That, you know, there's no part of the world that ever has done that. And I think I have to pay back a little bit too.
Thank you, Commissioner. So one of the questions that came through is following the line of discussion that you just presented. And so it says, if there are so many important things that are stuck in committee, what ideas do you have for freeing up the backlog? What is it going to take to be able to get things done?
It's real easy in the county. Now, in the city of Miami, I was basically the chairman of a mini assembly, legislative assembly of 5 people. I couldn't talk to the other 4, okay? In the county, the mayor has 27,000 employees, plus he can influence 11,000 that work for the public health system. He has no impediment in talking to any of the commissioners. He can hire and fire and get all the best and brightest in the system for a fairly modest salary. It is incredible what you can accomplish if you're the mayor. One other thing is I have put the county attorneys on notice that when they state that certain things cannot be presented because another commissioner, one of the other county commissioners who's still on the commission, and I have to work with her in the future, so I'll be careful what I say about this. As soon as the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust passed a resolution at my request saying stop using the money, misusing the money for operations and maintenance, the $100 million that we were misusing for about 10 years, we're still misusing it. She said, well, the county attorney said another commissioner wants to have that resolution worded in such and such a way and send it to committee in the form that she wants. So you have to wait for that. And I said, what are you talking about? Why do I have to wait for that? Now, they said, oh, because of the Sunshine Law, we cannot get involved in discussions between the 2 of you. And I go, the ones who are violating the Sunshine Law are you guys. So one of the things that the mayor has, besides the ability to hire or fire 27,000 people, ones that are managerial, I mean, the unions, they all have their contracts and their rights, but is he has the bully pulpit. And let me tell you, I've used it a few times, but as mayor, people are going to hear when something is stuck in committee, when anybody is not, stepping up and doing the right thing, and they're going to hear it loud and clear, because I did that when I was mayor of Miami. In the case of mayor of Miami, there was a moment where, I adopted the famous phrase of, I rather beg forgiveness than permission, because I didn't have that power. And so I had to take the lead, and I did many, many times. And that's why we got the things that we got when I was in office. In 8 years, we went from Paradise Lost to the place where everybody wanted to live was Miami. And you see my son do that a lot in the city of Miami with limited powers. The voters saw fit not to give him strong mayor powers, but hopefully, in my case, that's already part of the system. And I know how to wield power. I know how to do it in a nice, gentle way with 7 commissioners to approve anything that I put forth. And of course, when you have, your budget gurus and your technical gurus supporting what you and doing research. For example, on the COVID thing, I've had to do a lot of the research. I published an article and explained all the flaws in the randomized testing that they were getting ready to do, including why would you use a robocall from Carlos Jimenez to do a randomized test? That's perfect for self-selection. People that like him, people that don't like him, people that don't even want to hear from the guy. So, and now I'm working with another model that is very sophisticated to analyze just how many people have the coronavirus, and it's based on bacterial testing of our own wastewater. By the way, the numbers are different from the randomized testing. But when you have all of that, and you have the staff, and you have the lawyers, and you have the resources, you can get a lot of things done. And people are going to be surprised. When I was elected mayor of Miami, I announced a lot of things. When I was elected county commissioner, I announced a lot of things on transportation that some of which have come to fruition, but some of them, for example, we should never have spent $78 million to build a train station for a private entity, Aventura, to run private trains on a private track with private fares charged. Don't be surprised if we can put a stop to that. In the case of the Kendall Turnpike, whatever extension they called it, a lot of people who are allied with me, Paul Schweppes and the David Winkers of this world are out there, doing pro bono legal work, but or in some cases, we look for ways to, get a little bit of a fee in their pockets, and it's confidential because attorneys don't have to divulge where they get their fees from to do public interest law. But, in this case, you have all those resources. Plus, I think, the willingness and the courage to do the things that need to be done.
Thank you for that, and I'm glad.
And yes. To call out people that don't listen, I have a pretty good following on the internet.
Yeah. So thanks for bringing up the issue related to the coronavirus and the response here. So we have a couple of questions related to the current public health crisis. And so it's two questions. I'm going to try to sort of bring them in together. One of them is to get your feedback about the current plan to reopen. And in particular, the kind of work that the county should be or will be doing around contact tracing. So what's going to be happening in terms of tracking, or what should be done, and how should we be planning to reopen? Do you have a criticism or support for the current plan?
I forgot to mention, I had it in my notes, that throughout this, I have basically been excluded from any advice that I can give to the mayor. They call me when they've already made an executive order. They don't include me in the chairman's policy committee. So my advice has been basically to the mayor of Miami. Today I was presenting to him, some interesting points going forward, including the kind of equipment that should be present. I even sent him the specs for the laptop infrared testing that allows any person that enters into an establishment, a commercial establishment, to have the temperature measured from far away. So my input has been given mostly to the mayor of Miami. I think he's done a great job. The idea that, the current mayor of the county, he said, well, people are really after me to open beauty salons and golf courses. In fairness to him, it was beauty salons and barbershops. So, a lot of us would like to, to get that going. But, to then say, and to people who are using our parks, because the inner city parks really need to open, okay? I think that very much, but not necessarily, with 400 people following folks around. Those 400 people can be used for contact tracing, and to help the county to identify any new cases that come up. Right now, the number of cases, confirmed cases, as a percentage of those tested has gone down from about 10% to about 8%. The number of people that supposedly have it already or have some antibodies or remnants of the virus is 6%. So we're getting close to the point that the only people, that are supposed to be getting free tests are those that have some sort of symptoms. We're getting close to the point where the two are merging. And the key thing now is what needs to be in place for the employees and for the patrons of any establishments that open, and how can we continue to do social distancing. By the way, there's an article in the Wall Street Journal about Florida that says we were either lucky or, smart, and they mentioned briefly that officials in the city of Miami, they don't mention Mayor Suarez, that they, banned the two major events that were going to happen here. 150,000 people to alter at 250,000 at Calle Ocho. That was key. And then, of course, people have done very well by social distancing. You don't need to have 400 employees, newly hired in the parks telling people to stay a few feet away in a situation like that where you're out in the out in the sun and the heat that we have now. But what you do need is precisely that kind of manpower, that kind of personnel for the contact tracing. And also, frankly, you need the resources to help some of the small shops with some of the equipment they're going to need, including the infrared testing of any person that walks in. It's got to apply in a hotel lobby or in a restaurant. It's got to apply to every single person that comes to deliver anything, any client, any patron, any employee on a daily basis, and we'll get through this thing. And some of the things that have come out of the county mayor's office, including whether you can play doubles or singles, or the sport that I prefer, which is basketball, whether you can dribble by yourself, but you can't play 3-on-3. I mean, that's all nonsensical. We need to get to the people that need to get back to work and to the services that we need to provide for our small shopkeepers. Like I said, we're up to about 100,000 people that are unemployed, and they're the least paid, least benefits, the ones that Wendy Walsh represents with Unite Here, and that's the people we've been working with. And very little attention has been paid to them by the current mayor of the county. Hopefully the mayor of the city will do better when you see his regulations coming out.
Thanks for that. I was about to start my tennis up again, and it's no singles or doubles for me in any way. So I feel for that. So this next question is related to immigration. So what's your stance on sanctuary city status and the protection of our immigrant population?
When I was first elected, 1985, I got a call from the president of the League of Cities, who was the mayor of San Antonio, Henry Cisneros, later Secretary of Housing and Urban Development and a good friend. And he asked me to be in the committee of the League of Cities on immigration. And I said, well, Mayor, I'll be happy to do that, but I want you to know I'm an immigrant myself. I am very liberal on immigration. If you want somebody, that's as liberal as I am on that issue, then I'm in. He said, yeah, absolutely. So it's been my stand. I don't know if you remember when a lot of folks were treating Haitians differently from Cubans and so on. I put out a bumper sticker, interdict drugs, not Haitians. I supported NACADA over the years to allow Central Americans also. I frankly don't know what the concern is about immigrants. Immigrants, are the stuff of which this country is made, and I'm an example of that. How can I not give other people the same opportunity that I was given? And frankly, we need them. The replacement rate in the United States is 2.11 children per woman of childbearing age, and we're much below that. We need folks just to keep our population at the same level. And people that want to work hard. I mean, you see the immigrants, they have 3 or 4 different jobs. The famous skit is the Jamaican guy in New York who has like 4, part-times, and the Haitians are like that, and all the immigrants from the Caribbean. And people who make it here on a raft or a little rickety boat, you would think that, or across the border, those, I don't know if it was 10 or 12,000 people that were coming, from Central America into, we could have put together a program with the churches in the United States to place all those people into homes and jobs and learning the language. I do, think that immigrants, all of us, you probably, I don't know if you were born here, but certainly I do my best to speak the English language correctly. And sometimes I correct my buddies, and they say between you and I say, well, I'm just a refugee. You're supposed to say between you and me because it's a prepositional phrase. So anyhow, I think they make the best citizens, hardest workers. They pay taxes. If we have a path to citizenship, and what Jimenez did a couple of years ago made no sense whatsoever. Danielle and I voted against it, and she articulated in many ways the reasons that it was, from the legal standpoint, that it was wrong. We had a, perfect balance at the time. We don't try to seek out people that may be here illegally. We don't hide any of the data that we have. We share it, you know, as we're supposed to by law, but we don't have to become immigration agents or extensions of ICE or anything else.
Thank you for that. That was really helpful to hear. I know that there was a lot of concern a couple of years ago that were stirred by current events in came really from the 2016 election. This next question is actually related to that. It says, the current political climate of politics has taken a very nasty turn. What's your take on who, what, and how good government looks like?
Well, I made a few references to the mayor of Miami, who in many ways tries to follow my example, and I hope he does. You know, I'm independent for that very reason. You know, the back and forth that's going on is not helpful. In battling the coronavirus, it's funny, people don't hear facts from the other side. And, you know, we have to be scientific about it. We have to be objective about it. We have to be reasonable about it. We have to act as you know, and by the way, in elections, listen to this particular advice from Adlai Stevenson. He said, you have to be elected and not prove yourself unworthy of the position in the process. You have to, when you're running for office, and that's why I was very pleased when I ran for mayor many times. I lost many times, maybe because I was too ethical, but there was a Fair Campaign Practices Committee in Dade County, and every year that I would lose, they would give me the award for being the most ethical candidate. I tried to do that in my entire life, and I think that's the kind of politician we need. Let me tell you, when I speak to kids, if you take a pen from your office and take it home, if you take a stapler, if you take some extra paper, if you take the smallest thing and you think that you're going to sort of cut corners, you know, when you do your taxes, if you take deductions that are not correct, if you don't have absolute integrity, you don't belong in government. And by the way, sooner or later, they're going to embarrass you in the media anyhow. So sometimes unfairly, we had an incident like that during the coronavirus when certain newspapers tried to embarrass us because we got tested after Francis tested positive. Well, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to, you know, he was the only known case in Dade County. So, you know, 40 people around him were tested. And by the way, they all tested negative. And that gives you an idea, by the way, that the coronavirus, every virus is not the same as every other. A lot of folks have resistance and probably don't transmit it. And a lot of folks are transmitting it. And that's why we have to be particularly careful for our first responders and our bus drivers. This week, actually, I took pictures. No, last week, I took pictures of some of the drivers of the buses having to buy their own masks. Now, the county says, oh, no, we have masks for them. And I go, well, how come they have to buy their own, you know? Or you have them now, but you didn't have them last week, and you have enough budget to put, you know, 400 people in the parks telling folks to stay a few feet apart. And people can't figure out, by the way, a lot of those regulations anyhow. There's a letter to the editor today by somebody who says, I don't know where I'm supposed to wear a mask when I'm doing physical exercise or not. I mean, the attention that's being paid to those kinds of issues instead of, you know, the issues that really affect the livelihood of people in this community and the safety of people in this community is just wrong. And I battled that for 9 years. I think everybody has seen my battles with Mayor Jimenez. If they want to elect somebody, you know, along the same lines, well, they can do that, but that's not my style.
Thank you, Commissioner. The next question is regarding population growth. And the question says that with population growing at a fast pace, what needs to be done to preserve services and infrastructure?
Here's an interesting thing. Our tax base has been growing 6, 7, and 8% per year. Our population in Miami-Dade, 2.5%. But here's an interesting thing. Because of conservation, for example, we don't use more water from year to year. The per capita use is less each year. And so we expect for the next 15 years not to have to increase the water usage. There are a lot of things that people can conserve on. I expect, for example, on the transportation issue, that now the number of people working out of their homes, it used to be in the highest that I know, the highest rate was in Pinecrest with 10%. Now I think we're going to have 20 and 25% of professionals working out of their homes at least 1 or 2 days a week. I do that, 2 or 3 days a week, actually. Sometimes, well, during the coronavirus, I do it the whole time pretty much, unless I have to go out in the street for some reason. Population growth is not necessarily, a big concern in that sense. And to the extent that we become the most desirable place for real estate, for home ownership, that increases our tax base. Remember, the states depend on sales tax, the federal government on income tax. We depend on real estate taxes. And I don't think we're going to suffer that much because a lot of folks from other states are going to want to come to Florida at the end of this process. And we're already seeing a little bit of that, so we're going to lose a little bit from our tax base, but not that much. I did an article on that, which is supposed to come out in Miami today in the next few days, and I'll be happy to share that with your organization and members.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. I think that anytime that we can hear more about that, it's always good. And of course, this is always an opportunity for you to be able to engage with members of our community and through this platform. So the next question is, do you have any plans as mayor to address an increase in minimum wage?
Yes, I voted in favor of the living wage every single time it's come up. And here's one thing I said one day. One of my colleagues almost fell off the dais. When we talk about the people at Miami International Airport, okay, we have about 3,000 employees there that are our employees. We pay them a decent wage, okay? Maybe in some cases, not as much as they should get, but for the most part, a living wage and higher. We have 30,000 employees of private companies rendering services at Miami International Airport. Ulan is the one that gets brought up all the time, but the employees are not even getting 7 days vacation a year. So one of the things that I said was on the dais, I said, we can do something called reverse privatization. And, one of my colleagues almost fell off the dais, that I was talking about something that sounded like socialism. All I meant is we can tell these folks that are rendering, subcontractors rendering services to our, airlines, et cetera, that folks, we can take over a lot of those services. We can do them ourselves. Generally government is not as efficient as the private sector. But when you're talking about a monopoly, you don't have to be as efficient. You can pay people a decent wage. There's no way, I wrote an article about this, there's no way in the United States right now to make a living with $30,000 a year, which is even more than the minimum wage by about a third. The $30,000 a year person actually takes home less than $2,000, less than $1,600 a month. By the time you take out not only the payroll tax, you take out all of the taxes that go with the payroll, okay, and then you pay sales tax, regardless of income. It's kind of a regressive tax in many ways. You pay all of these hidden taxes. Why would we charge people $480 a year to pick up your garbage when that's one of the essential services of the government? Worse than that, why would you charge people to drive your jalopy on the highway, your little truck, if you have to, when we built those highways 30 years ago with taxes from 30 years ago, it makes no sense whatsoever to have tolls. The high occupancy lanes, Lexus lanes or whatever you call them, are totally unfair and unjust. And I meant to say in my opening statement that, FDR at one point proclaimed the 4 great freedoms. 3 of them were the classic freedoms from having people do something to you. The 4th freedom was proposed to him by the first woman Secretary of Labor, Frances Perkins, and it was a positive human right. freedom from want, but they weren't used to the idea that you could have a positive right. So, you know, right to a decent standard of living, right, the right to have, you know, decent health care, a roof over your head, and a job. You know, the three basic things that we need in society. And that's my philosophy. You know, it's been mine since I grew up with a dad that believed in all of that. And, you know, it's what we need to implement. And we can do it with the resources. Sometimes you hear people on the left side of the spectrum say, oh, but we need more taxes, we need more. Folks, we can't tax people more than we're already taxing them. I had an event at a home, a fairly modest home in Coral Gables, to the extent that any home in Coral Gables is all that modest, you know, particularly it had a canal behind it. Dr. San Giovanni, God bless him, he also took care of my feet. But anyhow, the poor man, being a doctor, you know, a little bit, as we say in Spanish, despistado, you know, a little bit absent-minded, had not done his homestead exemption. So he lost the homestead exemption. Guy was paying $47,000 a year. There's about 500,000 households in Dade County that don't have homestead exemption. So they're foreigners, they're people that are now permanent residents, or people that own more than one home, as I do. And the amount of taxes those folks pay is enormous. Let's apply those resources in a smart way. Let's not give it all and let the bureaucrats say, you know, we need to spend it for this or that. They come up with acronyms every week, a new acronym, you know. Thank God, SAVE, I've understood SAVE for a long time. I think since maybe Damien invented it, I don't know, way back. But anyhow, but these guys come up with another model, another acronym and whatever. Listen, you know, I'm going to be pretty harsh on the bureaucrats. I don't like the idea that every time I discuss an issue, instead of one person meeting with me, they show up with 4 and 5. Some of them, even the legal department, they show up with 4 lawyers. I go, listen, you know, if we're in the private sector, you know what I would tell you? One of you, and maybe an associate with a lower billing rate, but 3 and 4 lawyers for a small matter, you know, and by the way, you know, the director of the department has to know the department well enough to attend the commission meetings and not have to have 50 and 60 and 70 bureaucrats sitting out there, you know, to answer questions. The director of the department's got to know the basics, you know, and so there's going to be a lot of reform. There's going to be a lot of transparency. We've got to make it easier for people to know how we're spending the money. Our budgets are not standardized. They're not integrated. They're not parallel. They're a mess. We have departments that are part enterprise and part general revenues. I mean, it's just not the way we should do things. We have to make it so that people can actually give us input. And by the way, on that issue, maybe the single most important thing about me is I'm probably one of the most successful politicians that ever walked the face of the earth. We had a food drive the other day, and a lady tweeted me and said, you know, I don't have a car. Can I get to the Wynwood food drive, you know, on foot? And I said, I'm not too sure, but what do you need? She said, I actually just need masks. And I said, well, email me at Xavier Suarez ESQ at AOL, your address. The next day she had a couple of masks for her family, you know, and everybody has my number. Everybody has my email. I may have to change my 305-496-8484, but you all have it. The 8484, by the way, I stole from my son. That was his nickname when he was growing up. It was Titi, so we took the TITI, and that's the 8484. So that makes it even easier for you to remember. And you know, what you see is what you get. I never hide from the media. I don't think there's a single blogger out there that doesn't interact with me, mostly in a favorable way. And so I don't have to, you know, I don't have to justify myself. What I believe is what I believe, and everybody knows it. And what you see is what you get, you know, and that's important.
Absolutely. Commissioner, we are at the top of the hour, and I want to thank you for your time here with us. I know that the topics that you brought up repeatedly were transportation, ethics, fiscal reform, and then of course you highlighted your accessibility and your love for history and sharing a lot with us, what you've learned from other leaders throughout many years. I am going to begin to wind down. I need to be able to share my screen. Justin, I don't have that capability, but I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We will send out and distribute this recording to everybody so that we can be able to share the presentation with people so that they can be able to review it. We have 2 more forums just like this. We have one on Thursday with Commissioner Danilo Levine Cava, and then we have one on Friday with former Mayor Alex Pinellas. People are asking us how it is that they can get involved this year, and I want to just highlight a couple of things. Number one, please make sure that you answer the U.S. Census. These are very important federal dollars for us to be able to receive. Remember to register to vote. Take time and do that. This year, more than ever, it's not just important that you vote, but that you have a plan for what you're going to do around the elections. Make sure that you go out there, that you help canvass, that you help other people vote. Also, make sure that you sign up to vote by mail. We don't know what condition we're going to be in from a public perspective, public health perspective at that time. I mentioned earlier that SAVE is going to have its endorsement process. If you want to be a panelist, go to the SAVE website and sign up to be a panelist, volunteer with us, or become a member. As I mentioned earlier, we have all of these sessions coming up. Commissioner, you have the last words, 30 seconds or less, go for it.
I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for your involvement, for your activism, and for keeping politicians honest, you know. Thoughtful, and also for giving 15 minutes. I've never had a forum where I can have 15 minutes to expound and to be able to quote some philosophers and historians and political leaders. And so really, I just want to thank you all and tell you that I'm available for any further questions. Xavier Suarez, ESQ at AOL is easier than my phone, but either way.